Welcome to Keeping It Real. I am keeping it real with y'all tonight that I am so tired that I truly want to cancel this show tonight. But Tara, and then our special guest here, I think she just probably as tired as I am and wanted to cancel too. But we're all here. Look, we're all
We
here.
are here. We pressed.
And we are thankful to be here after all is said and done. It's really a good thing to be able to come and sit down and talk with you guys and talk among ourselves about some real strong topics that are applicable to daily life. And guess what? Just because we are people of God in the church world, it doesn't mean that these topics are not pertinent to us. But what happens oftentimes is that we don't get a chance to talk about it among us. We talk about it in the privacy of our homes and our best friends and, neighbors, people that we trust. But this platform comes to be able to address these things openly in hopes to help you and others and whoever you all know or we may know that we can give this information to and make life better for them. Thank you to everybody that's viewing. I just love y'all. Marsha, you know I love you, girl. Thank you for being out here. And I'm going to ask everybody if you would share, share, share. This is going to be a profound, profound show tonight. Do not leave until we are completed. Okay, enough of all of that. Hey, Dr. Val, my beautiful
Hey, hey,
my real cousin, my blood
your
cousin.
cousin, blood.
And then we have back our wonderful, beautiful guest. And I'm going to let her again tell you who she is and what her qualifications are for this conversation on tonight. Come on, my beautiful friend. You're looking gorgeous.
Well, thank you. I am Monet. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I'm licensed in that field. And marriage and family therapist does not mean I only see married couples or families. It just means that I have that additional qualification to be able to see those groups of people. So I also see individuals.
Awesome. And we appreciate you coming back. I got so much good feedback. So I want to openly tell you again, thank you for coming to the platform then, and thank you for coming back tonight. So listen, you guys, we're talking about rape in marriage tonight. We started this discussion of rape last week, and we dealt with it from the standpoint of children. And so we're just going to be hitting this topic from various different ways because it's a real topic. And, there is rape in marriage, contrary to what people may not think. Let me give you a quick statistic. Statistically, it is said that 10 to 14% of married women are raped by their husbands in the United States. Approximately 1/3 of women report having unwanted sex with their partner. That's some serious stuff, because when you get married, you don't think that you're going to have that problem or you shouldn't have that problem. So we're going to marry tonight our last discussion to this discussion about the rape, autonomy, and agency. Let's get right to it. Dr. Monet, I know you don't have your doctorate degree, but you're a doctor tonight. Listen, let's talk about this. So, let's start with the autonomy part. Is there real autonomy? Because that's where we left off at. Is there really true autonomy in relationships?
I think there can be true autonomy in a relationship. I wanted to, I found a good definition of agency before I got to autonomy. So I wanted to share the definition of agency and
Okay,
autonomy so that everybody understands what we mean by that.
great.
Okay, so it says agency is the sense of control that you feel in your life, your capacity to influence your own thoughts and behavior, and have faith in your ability to handle a wide range of tasks and situations. Your sense of agency helps you to be psychologically stable, yet flexible in the face of conflict or change. So, what I take that to mean is you are able to do it yourself. You feel confident that you can do it. You are allowed to do it. And the it is whatever that is. Um, a child, for instance, if they live in their parents' home, a young child might not have as much agency, right? Because what they are allowed to do and able to do for themselves is sometimes mandated by their parents. They don't have their own agency. They're not able to do things themselves. They don't have that confidence that they can do things. They don't have that faith that they can accomplish things. So just kind of trying to clarify what that agency means. And I'm going to look for a definition of autonomy.
Well, I got you right here, but I would prefer you to bring it out to us because
Okay.
I prefer what you find. Not that,
Okay.
I mean, you're the guest and you're the expert, and we respect that.
Mhm. Let's see. Hmm.
Again, you guys, please share. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a simple one that I like. Independence or freedom as of the will or one's actions. So one's actions and their will, they have freedom and independence to execute their actions or their
Can I
freedom.
stop or their freedom? So can I stop you a second? It does sound
Sure.
a lot like agency.
It does. It does.
So what would
So
be in your profession? What is the difference?
they're used interchangeably
Okay.
a lot. I mean, I suppose there's some incidences where one would be preferred over the other, but I'm not thinking of any right now. If I think of something, then I'll let you know kind of the distinction and where one would better fit than the other, but they're used interchangeably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there true freedom in a relationship to do what you want to do? Let's first start with just the relationship. We're not going to put the marriage on it yet. Just relationship. Is it true? I mean, in the very sense of the word. And I want you all to think about this because I'm going somewhere with this. Is it really true autonomy and/or slash agency?
So my belief is that there should be and there can be true agency and autonomy in a person that is in a relationship. What that means is not disregarding the other person,
Okay.
but it means you have choice.
You have
Truly, you
choice.
have choice.
So the other person has to respect your choice, though, as you have to respect their choice.
That's true.
So, how do you direct couples to come together? And so now I'm going to put it into couples.
Mhm.
How do you bring couples together to understand that when each one has their own mind and feeling of autonomy slash agency? I feel that I'm right in what I'm thinking. You feel that you're right. So, what would you tell the couples?
If it were a couple coming to me and they have that is what their issue is. I feel this way, I feel this way. I need the other person to understand I'm the one that's right. What I'm going to recommend is that both can be true. I don't know. We're not talking a specific scenario, so I can't, I don't have one to specifically speak on, but both things in a relationship can be true. One person can feel hurt and
Yeah.
the other person could not have tried to hurt them. Both of them can be true. Where, that argument can be, you hurt me, and the other person may say, no, I didn't. That wasn't even hurtful what I said. Well, it can be true that what you said, although your intention was not to hurt me, was hurtful to me. They're both true. So back to the respecting each other. If I'm talking to a couple and they have two differing points of view, my job in that situation is to make sure that each point of view is understood by the other person. Again, my job is not to tell them how to move forward or what to do, but my hope is that if they both have understanding of the other person, they're going to come to their own conclusions and they're going to make their own decisions that are going to be healthy. Sometimes you have to push a little bit, sometimes you have to suggest, sometimes you have to lead a little bit for people to make healthy decisions because we don't always make healthy decisions. Sometimes we make the decision that we know best, Sometimes we make the decision that feels the best to us, but that doesn't mean that it's a healthy decision.
Okay, and I get that. So then, in the face of sex in a marriage,
Hmm.
and do we need to separate sex in a marriage versus sex in unmarried couples? Do we need to separate that? Or we can just put those together?
I believe for the sake of this conversation, we can put them together.
Okay, wonderful. So when it comes to sex in a marriage, I'm going to give you an example. Someone actually came to me and asked about help in their marriage because they want to have sex, but the other person doesn't want to have sex. And the other person has a good reason for why not having sex, as the other one also has a good reason for wanting sex.
Right.
So here, because you said you didn't have a particular example. So in that example where perhaps in this case, there was no sickness. In this case, it was just a matter of, I just don't feel like having sex, period. And this case was a married couple. What, as a professional, just generally speaking, and you guys listen, don't y'all be going back saying I saw the show and she told me to,
Right.
cut teeth off and short in the intersection. No, don't do
That's
that.
right. That's
All
right.
right. So go ahead. In general, what would you suggest in a situation like that?
I'm glad you said in general, because when I'm working with a client, they bring forward an issue, and that issue is so very dependent on them as a person and their particular combination of personhoods, right? So I'm going to gather so much history about that person, how they got to where they are. So this couple that you're giving as an example, the person who does not want to have sex, it's not likely that that person just doesn't want to. It's likely something behind that. It could
Yes.
be psychological, it could be physical, it could be traumatic, it could be some trauma they experience. It could be, it could be a number of things, right? So me gathering that information is going to be helpful in understanding how we're going to move forward. Because if this is a hard stop for that partner, I refuse to have sex with my partner. I refuse to work on the effort. I refuse to change. I refuse to alter. If it's a hard stop, that's one conversation. But if there's room, then that's another conversation. And so maybe we need to have that conversation on what the room to move looks like, what the willingness is, all of those things. The other partner, same thing. So this other partner who says, I want to have sex with my partner, is this a hard stop? If we don't have sex, the relationship is over? Or is it, I'm willing to work? So there's just a lot of information to gather. And so I'm glad you said in general, because I don't know the specifics of this couple, but in general.
Yes.
If a couple
disclaimer, y'all, in general. Okay.
in general.
I felt that in my shana. In general.
In general.
Yeah.
If a couple comes to me with that, again, I'm gonna gather background information, but my question's going to be, for the person, okay, back up a little bit. Sex in a relationship is connecting. It connects two people. It is intimate. It is a connection. It is not the only way, but it is one of the ways. So the partner who says that they're missing it, that they would like to have it, could be losing connection with their partner.
Okay.
So
yes.
one of the ways that I can, in the interim of figuring out how to get them back sexually active, in the interim, one of the ways is, what are the other ways that you are connecting as a couple? Has this always been the only way you connect as a couple? Because we know that that's true for some people, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are sexually involved. The sex is great. And that is the way that they know how to connect with each other. Without it, they don't know how to do it, right? So maybe are there other ways that you guys are connecting? Are there other ways you guys are willing to connect? So that's kind of in the interim, and that's a good beginning place, because we don't want sex to be the only way that a couple connects. What were you
Right.
gonna
There
say?
needs to be more to it before
Hmm.
I gotta this is like such a good conversation because it is there sometimes where the man or the woman feels the need to either overpower that person or go outside the marriage.
Hmm.
Before we jump to that,
Hmm.
Dr. Val, you want to hit something on so far what we've come over?
Well, you said a lot, so give
I
me a
know.
minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with. Now I know that you're as a counselor, you want to stay neutral, and in general. So that's part of, um, the methods that you have to use going forward. I like the idea that you want to talk to both parties because there's something, that's not being brought to the forefront. There is a reason. I mean, whether it was something happened or they've lost interest in whether they've lost interest in them sexually, then that's another case too, and that can go far. But I do bring the spiritual aspect in there because the whole idea of sex, the whole creation and purpose of it came from God. And so when we have people that are engaging in something that was given by God and they're not going by whatever the purpose and also the parameters of it are, then you're going to have discord, discontent, and it's going to get worse. Now, in the case where it is a situation where they are both in Christ, they're not both in Christ, then, they got two separate sets of rules. You really have an enormous problem going on there. If they're both in Christ and somebody's just stubborn or they're mad or unforgiving, then that's not a hopeless case because that's something that can be explored. What happened? When did you start feeling these ways and what triggered it? Are you willing to hear why this person feels this way? And are you objective enough to say that if these problems weren't there, then we wouldn't have a problem coming together? So those are some of the things. And in a situation like that, they both have autonomy because the one has been given the liberty to say, all right, if we can fix those things, then yes. And then the other one has been given the autonomy to say, if these things continue to be a problem, then I'm not going to have a desire and I will just be going through the motions. And so, in a case like that, nobody wins. So, one of the things that I thought about is agency is a sense of control, and then autonomy is your will. Both of those are included. I don't have to give you my body because I don't want to because of what has happened. And then the other person saying, but I need this. And that's usually the male because the male's involvement in sexual activity is not just emotional, it's mostly emotional, and there is a heart attachment with women. But for men, it is an anxiety control, it is a release, it is a comfort. So there are a lot of things there. Ultimately, there has to be equity. There has to be equity and being objective if there's going to be a resolution. So now, if one person says, no, we haven't addressed this, we haven't talked about that. That's like saying, what's for dinner? Well, you didn't tell me why you busted the window out the car. We're not going to just move on like nothing ever happened. We got things we need to talk about before we go on. And so, if they don't have that objective disposition that, what, you're right, this has gone far enough, let's talk about it. But to just say, well, hey, and this is true, but just to say, hey, girl, your body doesn't belong to you. And then just for the other individual to say, hey, I need this, you're my wife, and if I don't get it here, it's going to make me weak. That's Bible too. It says, don't defraud one another unless you give an occasion to sin. So there has to be autonomy, and people need to grow up because a lot of this, you know, give accountability, take accountability for what you did or what you didn't do, that has brought the situation into the status that it is, and the other person needs to do the same thing. And then you have a grounds to begin to parse out and work on. Oh,
You
yeah.
got yourself on mute.
I'm sorry. Do you mind, Dr. Val, mentioning your distinction again between agency and autonomy? You said one was.
So yeah, I took it from your definitions,
Oh.
and you were writing. You said for agency is a sense of control,
Mm-hmm.
and also stability and flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was agency. Autonomy was will and action. Will to do. So the words that really stood out, like the functional words, was sense of control. You have, if you don't have a sense of control, you're not enjoying this. You're violated. This is wrong. This is making the problem worse, pouring fuel on the furnace. And then if the other person doesn't um, have that will, I just can't. I don't hate you. I don't want to be divorced from you, but right now I'm not attracted to you, or I'm not stimulated by you. So then you have to talk about that.
Yeah.
Why? Is it an argument? Is it the way I look now? Is it the way I present? Am I too casual? Have I shown a side of you that you've never seen, of me that you've never seen? Because she still may be gorgeous and Coca-Cola bottle and have the fragrance and everything. But now, I can see that you're mean, and that is a big turnoff, etc. on both sides.
Mm-hmm. No, I liked that distinction, so I appreciate that. The will versus the control.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, what is said about the going out on a marriage causing sometimes also the rape in a marriage is the fact that men don't want to be vulnerable as women are vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Number one. Also, the fact that women are more vocal and men are not as vocal. So, when you come into a relationship, um, of that nature in your profession, how would you direct them? Because the general consensus is what I just said. Men are not as vocal. Men are more emotional. No, men are more, emotional, and women are more vocal and emotional. Like we're the two, they're the one.
Mm-hmm.
How would you help that couple?
Is that me?
No, I'm speaking to the guest, Monet.
You're asking how would I help them to do what?
Get through that, because that's a real problem. Like I hear that all the time. Well, the woman wants to talk before sex happens because, as Dr. Val alluded to, as well as yourself, something went down. You didn't fix my brakes today. You didn't say good morning. You didn't cook last night. I mean, you didn't bring the food or whatever. There's always something that the woman wants to bring up. And the man doesn't want to do that. He just wants to get busy. So how would you help that person? And at this point, I'm not talking saved or unsaved. I'm just talking relationships, period,
Mm-hmm.
between two people, sexual.
Yeah. So if that was presented to me, couple came to me, my first thought, this is not what I'm saying out loud, but my first thought is, when did you learn this about each other? Was this not apparent when you were dating? Was this not apparent in the beginning? What kept you from knowing that she needs to talk more and I need to do more, and I don't, that does not match? When did that happen? So was it oblivion? Were we just not aware? Did we just think that, were we lying, right? And then all of a sudden, things got real and you're like, oh, how do we do this? So that's my first question. So then again, I'm going back in history. I'm asking, what connected you to? How has it worked well in the past? What I know as a therapist is we often forget, especially in a long-term relationship, we often forget what works because we're so in the present conflict. So what is happening right now is so fresh, and it's taking over, that we don't remember that before we used to go to the movies every Monday, and then afterwards we used to talk for an hour in the car, and that was really helpful for us, right? We forget these things, and I don't mean forget as in you can't remember, but forget to do them. We change, we shift, we evolve, we start doing different things. Life happens, and things move and shift. So part of what I try to do for couples is to see if they are able to gauge what has worked well for them, and to see if that's a possibility now that we can reintroduce those things. If it has not worked, and just say it was an oblivious couple, just say that they did not even realize that they had this difference, and now they're in a marriage and they're like, what do we do? It's my job to introduce tools, to offer tools, to tell them good ways to communicate with each other.
So can I stop you there? What's a good way? What's a good way to communicate? Because at this point, and I have, before I finish that, I have a comment up on the screen. So I want you to address this comment by the Facebook user in just a second. And by the way, guys, we appreciate all the questions, comments. Just bring them on. Yes. So what? How do you tell the couple? Name something to help them to communicate, because that's what you said. Sometimes they need to communicate. What's the tool?
One tool that is my favorite is a practice in active listening. And so just real quick, I'll walk you through the process, right? So if my frustration is that you are not understanding what I'm talking about or why I feel the way that I feel, and like you said, maybe the husband is like, why do we have to talk about it? And the wife is like, because it affects me, and I can't have sex with you unless we get through this. Then I'm going to ask the couple to pick a time where they're going to have this conversation. Be willing to listen to each other during this time. Choose the person that is going to be the speaker and the person that's going to be the listener. This can happen on the same day where, I'm the listener today, you're the listener later on today, or this can be 2 different days. It's however you need to do it. So in this conversation that we're having, if I'm the speaker, then I'm going to say to you, Vicki, I'm going to say, I am really frustrated that you did not take out the trash. And when you don't take out the trash, it makes me feel like you expect me to do everything. And then I get overwhelmed. And then when I talk to you about being overwhelmed, you dismiss it like that's my job anyway. And so I'm going to ask the couple after that speaker says something to say, can you tell me what you heard me say? I'm going to say that to you, Vicki. Can you tell me what you heard me say? And then you're going to repeat it back. Now, in this exercise, most times people repeat back, not word for word, they repeat back what they interpret it as.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is actually helpful because now I know your interpretation of it, and I can see where the difference and the conflict is happening, because you're hearing, you don't ever help me, you're not worth anything, why am I even married to you? That's what you're hearing, and I'm not saying that.
Yeah. No, this is so real, because that's the actual truth. That's something that we got into in the last show, interpretation. People are not saying the same thing, therefore they can't have the same understanding. Therefore, they can't have respect and autonomy nor agency. I mean, it's a chain, it's a linking chain, right?
It is. They're having 2 different conversations.
Right.
Because I'm speaking on this thing, you're speaking on that thing, but we're, it's separate.
We're far apart. Yeah, it's all about, okay, let's address the question or the comment here. Sounds very clinical. This came up while Dr. Val was talking. The person says, sounds very clinical, as you can see. What are you saying? I'm familiar with the behavior in marriage. Rape in marriage is not negotiable. It is violent and without discussion. Okay, can you address that professionally, Monet? From your profession. Val has a profession too.
Rape is violent. if we're talking personal opinion, right, you may say, that's non-negotiable. We're going to get a divorce if you rape me, right? If I'm, as a therapist, I don't have that option to say to a couple, rape is non-negotiable, get a divorce. I don't
Right.
have that option. It's not,
Right.
that's not for me to do. So my option, and the reason why it would be clinical for me, is because it is literally clinical for me. I'm a
Yeah.
clinician. So when I'm talking to somebody, I have to determine what they need and what they want. So if if it's the male that's raping the female, and the male's point of view is, your body is mine, you are mine, you give it when I want it, doesn't matter what you want. Maybe the male is willing to have the conversation with me, or maybe he's willing to have separate therapy sessions with me to see where that came from for him. And again, if there's any room, is there any room to change that perception of, I have the right to your body enough so that I'm going to take it?
Well, that's when people take autonomy to another degree, right?
Well,
Because
no, because that
okay,
is not the definition of autonomy. Autonomy and agency is about self, right? It's not about the other person. So you can say, I have the right to have sex with my wife. And that can be true for you. That does not give you the right to have a behavior that goes along with it. That gives you the right to have that feeling, to have that thought, to have that belief.
now you just said something. How do you separate the behavior from the thought and the feeling? I mean, whatever a person thinks and feel is going to be what they act out in most
Well,
cases, right?
that is where maturity comes in. That is where self-control comes in.
Uh-huh.
That is where uh, I forgot the term that I was going to use, but that's where self-control, emotional regulation comes in. That's what I was looking for. Emotional regulation, right? Just because a person has a feeling does not mean you go do the thing. That is what a child does. A child says, I want the candy, and they snatch the candy and they run out the store. That's what a child does. An adult does not an adult, because being an adult does not mean that you have emotional regulation. A healthy person, a person with healthy emotional regulation, does not do that. That person understands that what they want, what they feel, what they need is separate from what they are, what they have the right to do with another person.
They are able to have reason.
They're able, thank you.
They're able to reason.
They're
Okay,
able to
Dr. Val, do you want to address that? This came up, and then we've got two more statements. Well, okay, we
Okay,
got.
well, there's some very important things that I do want to say that I think we're going to connect, because I know that your clinician license and your approach is going to address some things, but I had some other things that did come up, which are very real, and somebody's going to receive it or be helped by it, hopefully. Number one, I would say know your companion. Know your companion. Because if you don't have an understanding of who you're with, you got, nothing but problems up the road. Get to know your companion. And what I mean in that is, when there are problems, what is it about your companion that exacerbates the situation? For example, if the female is, no, I want to be intimate because we put it on the male. I want to be intimate because, if you're not giving to me, then where is it at? Who's getting it? And there may be feelings of insecurity or rejection that may make this a very forceful conversation. And many people may not want to admit it, but this is something that is very real. So no situation is, no two are alike. There's a dynamic on the male side and the female side. He may have come from a long line of infidelity. She may have come from a long line of rejection. But they're still attracted to each other. And so, now they're together, and here comes everything right out of the luggage, out of the baggage. So when it comes to something like that, I say that it's good as you're learning your companion, learn their communication, how to work with them both on the outside physically and with conversation. Also to know your companion, know what defrays a heated situation. When things begin to escalate and the control goes out the window and it gets beyond civil. So, and it gets worse. It's like, well, what you just said just made that worse. And now what you're doing is adding on top of it. So know the things about your companion that can either de-escalate or neutralize the environment. And that automatically sets somewhat of a platform for rationale. And that's not clinical, that's just logical. But I think that
It's also clinical. That's very.
it could be. And I think that if we're mature enough, it's like, well, we really should find out. Let's just calm down and take a step back, take a breath, and find out, and then know the heart of your companion. Now, I know that when my husband gets upset, there's certain things I can talk about, and he's so ensconced in them until the conversation goes, and he goes and he gives. And that is defraying the frustration and the anger at the same time. So that is a major point. Know your companion, how to de-escalate. The other thing was realize if there's stubbornness and obstinance, then you're not being mature. So what can you get accomplished with that? It's my way, and your my way is not your way, and I'm stuck where I'm at. I'm fixated on where I'm at. Well, this is not the time to talk, because obviously it's not going to get anywhere. So those are some of the things that I wanted to put out there in being able to maintain the autonomy, the respect for each part. Each equal has a part, but there is never a justification in any way that one person has all the decisions. It's not fair, it's not logical, and it's not conducive to a lasting environment. And God forbid children are seeing this, because you're jacking up another generation.
Okay.
That was
So,
professional.
address these next comments. Thank you, Dr. Val. Monet, address these next comments, because I'm not sure if it's the same Facebook user, but before you address that one, this came through. I believe mine is different than what you are discussing. A physically abusive husband that rapes you as a part of the abuse. Thank you for your comment. Can you address that, Monet?
Okay. Thank you for that clarity to the person who wrote this. I hope that you were on when we were talking before, that what I'm offering is very general, and what your case, if we're talking about yours specifically, I may have something more specific to say to you, right? If you were my client. And so I appreciate that you're giving more context to what's going on in your situation. So a physically abusive husband that rapes you, that is awful. And I hate that that's what happened to you. If we're talking about this situation again, if you came into my office with your husband, I said the last time that I was a guest that my client is what the couple tells me my client is. So if the couple says, we want to figure out how to move forward in this relationship, we want to figure out how to make this relationship work, then that's what my client is. And even if you were physically abused and raped, then that is what my client is, to figure out how to move forward in the relationship. My hope is that as we're talking about this, the three of us would learn if that is feasible. We would learn if this physically abusive husband is willing to alter his behavior, or if he's coming into therapy because he wants his behavior excused, if he wants to have it justified, if he wants to say, if she would have done this, or if she did this, I would not have to hit her, right? If those type of conversations are happening, again, I can, but I am not going to tell the wife to leave the husband. I'm not going to tell the husband what he needs to do. What I'm going to do is introduce healthy ways of dealing with emotions, of having conflict, of having conversations, hopefully for this abusive husband to understand that there are other ways to accomplish what he is trying to accomplish by controlling the wife. I want you to know, the person who posted this, that there is a distinction between me as an individual, my opinion, my heart, and how I feel about abuse, and me as a clinician and what I'm going to present in a therapy session. There is a distinct difference, and that's how it should be. That's how it's meant to be. There should be a distinction. So I hope that you are not hearing me disregarding how awful this is, but I hope that you're understanding that Vicky's asking me as a clinician what it would look like in a therapy session, and that's what I'm trying to offer.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's great. And here is the other comment that came. You have to understand, after a woman gets raped, there's fear that comes over her. She will shut down.
Yes. Yeah, yes. I cannot imagine what it is like to be in a relationship with someone that you cannot, being in the relationship with them does not allow you the same escape that it would if it were a person on the street that raped you and you're able to disconnect from that person, right? You're able to not be around that person. But if you're raped in your relationship, that relationship confines you. I cannot imagine what that feels like, to have to heal and continue to hurt with your abuser. So yes, I agree with you. There can be fear, of course, because how do you know what's going to happen next? How do you know what's going to instigate it? How do you know what's true and what's not true? And shutting down is a protection method, right? Like shutting down your mind or your body is your attempt at protecting yourself from being hurt further. So I would recommend to this person who's saying that she's experienced that, to get help. I don't know your situation, and it may be very presumptuous of me to say just get help, because you may not be able to do that. The help that I would offer, of course, is a women's center, a therapist, and you can do that virtually, you can do that in person, a person that you trust to talk to, or a person that you trust to shelter you, or a person that you trust to just hear you and be there with you. Because maybe you're not at that point where you can get out of this situation, but having someone there to love you as you're being abused is also helpful, and it can embolden you, is what I'm trying to say.
And this comes as well. The respect has left the building after a man has raped a woman.
Get that?
Yeah.
I get that. That man does not have respect for this other person's space, their body, their agency, their autonomy. They don't have respect for it.
Yeah, this is a pretty tough subject. And to the viewer, my sincere prayers, and I hope and pray that there's that you will be able to take advantage of the advice just given. Okay, she writing, the person's writing back, but when I was in it, I couldn't get help. The fear. Yeah.
I'm so glad. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you're good now.
Yeah, I am too. And there could be somebody listening that is going through the same thing. I think this is a warranted conversation. As nephew John said, this is a great conversation. I think it's warranted because there's so many. Now let's confine it to the church. There's so many people. Oh, and let me say this. Let me back up. Let me digress a minute. The reason I'm going to confine it to the church, because as we know, saints are not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to go outside the marriage. We know, though, as a general understanding, marriage is supposed to be respected no matter what your faith is or non-faith. marriage in the United States is supposed to be honored, one to another. However, an unsafe person doesn't feel that same weight. And oftentimes, because if you don't have the Holy Ghost, then you don't have anything to convict you. So that's where I'm coming from with this question. I'm speaking now of people that are filled with the Holy Ghost, and have conviction. And thank you, viewer, for that interchange, that exchange of conversation. So to the believers, oftentimes there is so much going outside of the marriage in the church. There's
Mhm.
just it just is. Let's just go ahead and talk about it, because it's from the pulpit to the back door, from the back, from the back of the church or the entry of the church to the pulpit. What would you, and if it's the same that you've said all night, you can say that. What would you tell the person who is saved and trying to hang in there, but having those issues, whether it's the woman or the man? We don't want to put it all on the man, it's the woman too, going out and taking advantage of the lust of their flesh simply because they can't get it at home.
Mhm. So let's assume that this person that you're talking about who's coming in to see me has said to me that they want their spirituality to be considered. They want to have full conversations about their spirituality and what that looks like. Not all of my clients want to do that and are interested in that. But we're going to assume that this client is talking about God and what salvation looks like for them, and what their value system is in Christ. Like, they're talking about all of those things. Then the history that I'm wanting to get from this client is, what does that look like? Your belief system, where did it come from? What is it? What are the scriptures? Who are the people? Who are the players? I'm gathering that information. Because if we have someone who, for instance, is staying in a marriage because you're not supposed to get divorced if
According
you're a
to, yeah,
Christian, right?
right,
Like, if that's
right.
the reason,
Mm-hmm.
yet you are committing adultery. Those are both things that you're not supposed to do. And I put supposed to in quotes because I don't use supposed to in therapy, because
Yeah,
what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do is relative to what your beliefs are in your system,
yeah.
and all of those things. Your belief system. So you have two things that you're not supposed to be doing, yet you've chosen one. You've said, I'm going to disregard the respect of marriage by committing adultery. Our conversation is going to go back and reflect on, what are your beliefs? What are your values? What has helped you make this decision to go outside of your values? And what is your choice? Because if your choice is to remain in the relationship because you feel like you have to be committed in it, what is the point um uh if you are voiding it by committing this other offense against your value system?
Yeah, because it just muddies the waters now. I mean, because that person is never going to be right on either side, because, people don't believe in this, but women have intuitive knowledge. We do have intuitive
Absolutely,
knowledge.
absolutely.
And so if it's the man going out, the woman has some inkling eventually, maybe not at that moment, but she's going to know. And then if the woman is going out on the man, he possibly might know too. I mean, he might be able to tell, because once you make a connection to another person
Mm-hmm,
sexually, I
mm-hmm.
mean, the Lord designed that for a reason, because he said the two become one.
Yeah.
So how are you going to become one with more than one?
Yes. Yes.
You
Yes.
know what I mean?
I
And
do.
so this is why I think it's pertinent to talk about, because what I hear you saying and what you've been saying all night, and I love your approach. You really, as I used the word before, assess a situation. You call it what do you call it? What was that word you just used? You're going to ask questions,
Gather history.
gather history. So
Mhm.
you use the verbiage gather history,
Mhm.
and I use the word assessment because where I come from legally, that's where assessment meant, as we discussed that. So now this is a prime example of interpretation. You have to get a meeting of the minds on what you mean. So we mean the same thing semantically, using it differently. However, if that's the case, the reason we need to talk about it is because what you're saying is that people don't just arbitrarily make decisions to do things, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing.
That's right.
Everybody's right. Okay, so the decision to rape your significant other or your spouse
Yep.
is not just a I just decided to do that right now. That came from somewhere
That's
in
right.
the history of your life. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
And so the way you approach it is to walk them back through the history of their lives to make them see how they ended up making this kind of decision.
Yes.
I think that's profound.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
that's
And then once we get back, we go to the past to get back to the future. Now the question is, or to get back to the present, I'm sorry. Now
yeah,
the question is, what does the future look like? What is your choice? Again, this goes back to autonomy and agency, right? What is
right.
your choice? Is your choice to remain in this relationship and continue to step out of the relationship? Because that's your choice. You can do that if you choose. However, the other person in this relationship also has a choice. Because if you come in and you say, well, I'm not getting a divorce, I'm a Christian, I don't believe in that, but you're not having sex with me, and so I'm going to have this person on the side. You have that right. That, okay, do that. The other person also has a right to say, that's not acceptable to me.
Mm-hmm.
Either we work on the marriage or we work on the divorce.
Dr. Val,
As a
you want to?
therapist, I'm working
Yeah,
on whichever one you tell me to work
right,
on.
right. Because you can't make the decision for them.
I
My
cannot.
dad used to say, "Don't get in between scissors; they will cut." Dr. Val,
Yeah, there is a lot to be said here. So, number one, the Bible does tell us that when it comes down and we're talking, the word divorce has come up and leaving the marriage. Well, the Bible does tell us that, you are in that marriage, you've made a vow, you've made the commitment, and you're free in the case of adultery. All right, so there's free, but there's a freedom, there is a liberty, and God's not going to hold it against you. However, he didn't say that that is definitely the next step. I say that because when we look at, let me just go to Malachi 2:16. Malachi 2:16 says, "For the Lord, the God of Israel, hates the putting away. He hates divorce." Now, so you can go, but you don't have to go. But I hate divorce. Now, if we want to really look at this as a model, we have models that people may have, and they may work for some, they may work for others. Um, we have a model. When we look back in the Old Testament, Israel was God's woman. And how many times did she commit whoredoms? How many times did she commit adultery against him and give to others what was his, and physical adultery? And so, but he forgave and brought her back multiple times. I say that to lay a platform for this. Every marriage that has suffered infidelity is not doomed for just absolute destruction. There are many marriages that have incurred that infidelity, and it broke hearts and it ruined some people's lives, but some have stayed together and they worked through it because the love was stronger than the anger and the hurt, and they came back together and they were able to maintain for decades a beautiful marriage. And when you do that, you don't go looking back saying, and you did this, or every time you look at them, you get mad. Well, it's in you now. Either you forgave them or you didn't. Either you're moving on or you aren't. But if every time you look back, you say you're mad, then, when you really get mad, you're going to open up. And if it hadn't been for so and so and so and so, yeah, then you're living in misery. You're living in distress, unforgiveness, and bitterness. And all of that is affecting your physical being. But God gives us the liberty to leave, but He doesn't say we have to. He says He hates the putting away of divorce. And then further, there can be reconciliation. That's what God does. He reconciles with us. And I say that in many cases, from what I've seen, the heart of God, and that's what we need, the heart of the Father, is generally found in the heart of a woman, because most of the time she'll be the one that will be willing to forgive, where a man is like, oh no, you've been tainted by some other man. Don't come in here anywhere near me. So that's a lot to discuss, and that's a lot to unpack, but those are some good facts.
So we've got 4 minutes left. And Monet, do you want to give us your last words? If you want to close it out on this part, and you got to come back. I got to
Well,
get a
I actually, Dr. Bell, you said earlier, know your spouse or know your partner. And I think with everything you just said, that it makes sense to say know your relationship. If we're talking about infidelity, know your relationship. And that's where I come in, right? To help the couple understand their relationship, understand if their relationship works well, if it can work well again, if it ever worked well, just know your relationship, because some relationships can handle infidelity and some cannot. What you said, there are some people who are not, because of their history, because of their past, because of their experiences, they're not able to let go. They're not able to forgive. They're not able to see past this offense. There are some people who are not able to let go of infidelity. They do it once, they're going to do it 5 more times, right? You have to know your relationship. You have to know your partner. And sometimes you need support and assistance with doing that, which is why therapy can help, because your lens and your perspective is very limited to what you've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a negative thing. It's just a fact. Your experience, your perspective is based off of your experience. So to have someone to help you see outside of your experience, to help you understand outside of your experience, can give you a perspective that helps you make the decision of whether this is going to be a safe and healthy relationship going forward.
Awesome. That is wonderful. As the viewer said, very good information. I wish we had time to just go deeper. This is such a huge conversation. It's just
It
like
is.
huge. And there's so many factors that you have to take into account. I hope that whoever's listening and whoever will listen, that you will gather from this that it is really, really good to consider therapy when it comes to relationships. It is good to consider that you might need it. And even if you think you don't need it, if you're in a relationship, just go ahead and get it, because timing is also a concern. And I think that people need to be able to discern the right timing in their relationship, which falls under know your relationship.
That's
Dr.
right.
Val said, I know my husband when he's such and such.
That's
And even with me, I know my husband knows me. So it's timing, it's communication, it's knowing, your relation, all of that is knowing your relationship. It's also being of integrity. You cannot have a relationship if you are not honest. You wanted to say something, Monet, about that real quick?
no,
Oh,
no,
I
you're
thought your
you're
hand was up.
right. You're right.
Yeah, integrity has to follow in your you got to start with it. You got to start with it. And I don't see how anybody can go to bed who is saved and not have integrity in your marriage. If you go to bed without integrity, I hope you wake up and decide you're going to exercise integrity. God bless each and every one of you tonight. I hope that this has been helpful. Thank you, Monet. You know, we're going to bring you back at some point. We may not bring her back as quickly as we did this time around because she is working. She does have a son, beautiful son. But we are going to continue this discussion, and we're going to bring some brothers to the platform for the discussion.
I love that.
So, yeah, stay tuned. All right, everybody, have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Val, for the wonderful comments. I hope everybody will share
Thank
them.
you, Monet.
And be
No
blessed.
problem.
Thank you,
Bye,
Monet.
Dr. Val. Bye, Vicky.
All right, bye-bye.
Ladies.